My name is Anne Connolly and I'm Chair of the Northern Ireland Policing Board. You're all very welcome here this evening, and I'm very pleased that so many members of the board have been able to join us this evening, and I hope that you take the opportunity to meet with them as the evening progresses. We are delighted to be here because this board certainly feels that it's important to give all communities the opportunity to have their say on policing issues and to put their questions to those who make the key decisions in policing. And of course, the Chief Constable is here this evening, and I'm very happy that you give him all of the hard questions. We're holding this meeting jointly with the Derry PCSP, and we very much welcome the positive partnership that we have with this PCSP and the opportunity to highlight the benefits that PCSPs bring to local communities. And you will have the opportunity later this evening to hear a little bit more about the work of PCSPs. The theme of tonight's meeting is around policing with the community, and the Chief Constable will say more about that when he comes to address you. Research which the board recently commissioned and had carried out by the University of Ulster has examined the key factors that influence community and policing, confidence in policing in the community. And interestingly, and maybe not surprising for some of you, the findings state that the research findings state that confidence is much more than police simply doing a good job or officers being on the ground. People want more than that. People want openness, honesty and transparency in the police approach. And that's essential, and how it is communicated is important to the public. The public, members of the public, yourselves, all of us, expect to know what we can, what we need from our service delivery. Much of our recent discussion at the board and debate, I'm sure you know, has focused on the budgetary situation, and I'm sure that some of you will have questions on that this evening and how that might affect the services in which you're interested. But while we understand, as with the rest of the public sector, that there will be impacts, we also know that there's still a substantial resource there for policing. And our job with the Chief Constable is to look at what we can do and to make the best of the resources that we have. So that's something for you to think about as we move into discussion this evening. Before I hand over to the Chief Constable, I just want to draw your attention to a few housekeeping points. Firstly, we are live streaming this meeting live on the internet, but the camera has been positioned so that it's not focusing on the audience. But we're also recording the meeting and taking photographs to use in our publications. So if you don't wish to appear in a publication or you don't want your photograph taken, please let one of the staff know. No fire drills scheduled for tonight, so if the alarm does go off, please exit using the side doors, out through the foyer and to the front of the building where there is a fire assembly point. Those of you who've just joined us may not know the toilets are through the cafe, the left-hand side before the exit, and all of the exits and the toilets are clearly marked. I will shortly be handing over to my colleague Debbie Waters on the board to facilitate the rest of the evening, but it's now my pleasure to introduce to you the Chief Constable George Hamilton. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It is a huge privilege for me to be here in this city tonight. I suppose my trips to Derry, Londonderry, as a police officer over the last 29 years actually have, for me personally, looking back, mark out the progress that has been made in our society over the last 29 years. I remember as a young constable stationed in Fermanagh, driving from Enniskillen to Castleberg and Strabane up to Derry and parking in Edinburgh Army Barracks, as it was then, in queues of dozens and dozens and dozens of big grey Land Rovers, and we were really going to be there for 2 or 3 days, and we were going to be fighting with various sides of the community. Not was our desire, but actually there was such doom and gloom around the place that was the introduction that I had to this city. And actually, as time has progressed and the peace process has really taken traction, I can plot through my own life experience of even choosing to come here for a weekend with my wife to celebrate a wedding anniversary, for example. And of course, at the opening of Aberdeen Square just a few years ago with the First and Deputy First Minister, and the event being chaired by that great son of Derry, Jerry Anderson. What a night that was, that same square where all those grey Land Rovers were parked was actually a night of wonderful celebration, with the entire city coming together to use that public space, that shared space, that space of positivity, as it was, all the development was completed just in time for the City of Culture. So, without boring you with my life's journey, I suppose for me coming here as a visitor to your city, it is with a sense of optimism and a sense of pride of the journey that policing has been on, and of the success and the positivity of the process, that the peace process that has actually developed and grown through my adult life in this place. And I'm grateful therefore, and for me, without being too dramatic or too emotional about it, this is actually a very significant event when we can see policing as it was envisaged in Patton, connected with communities, being answerable to communities, working with communities through police and community partnerships, through engagement with our accountability body in the board who oversees the effectiveness and efficiency of the police service. And for me, even though that accountability sometimes can be a bit awkward and a bit uncomfortable, it is a really healthy thing in terms of holding the police to account, legitimising the police, and making sure that policing with consent, that great principle of policing in these islands, is actually reinforced, because we know that it's only policing with consent that actually leads to good policing and confidence in policing. I want to talk to you, I'm still just sort of the new boy as the Chief Constable, I suppose, in many ways. I want to talk to you a wee bit about some of the very basic principles that I understand policing to be, and then I'm very happy to put myself up later in the programme under Debbie's facilitation to take any questions or any challenge indeed about how I see policing, and about whether my speak, as they say in some parts, actually fits with my actions. I think that's a good thing to do. We always challenge one's rhetoric against our actions. So I suppose in the very basic sense, and this isn't rocket science by the way, if you're looking for something new and innovative, then you've probably come to listen to the wrong person. But this is actually the basic building blocks of good policing that I want to tell you about. And I have been trying to spread this message right across the PSNI internally, because I think people need to hear it. The police service exists to keep people safe. That is the purpose of policing. That is why I would argue the majority of police officers, certainly the majority of good police officers, join the police service in the first place. This desire to keep people safe. And what does that actually mean? Three things, and again, the people who have written the legislation for us, and the Police Act and all the rest of it, have articulated this, but I actually passionately believe it. It's about preventing harm, it's about protecting people, and it's about locking up bad people. I better not say that because Noel McCarthy will challenge me that that's not necessarily the best disposal within the criminal justice system. But it's actually about bringing offenders to justice. And I passionately believe that that's what policing is about. Protecting people, preventing harm, and detecting offenders. And if I can get into my police officers those simple messages about what you do, that's probably about 40% of my job done. There's a really important part that follows on from that is actually more important, what I would call the 60%, and it's about how we do it, because we can be technically good, we can have great arrest rates, we can have great detection rates, we can see crime going down, we can see bad people being locked up or put through community restorative justice schemes or whatever it is that we do to exercise justice. But actually, if we don't do it in the right way, the how we do it, that 60% as I call it, is actually as important or more important than what we do. And that's what we call policing with the community. That's about communities being involved in policing. That's about you being here tonight, for example. that policing with the community about how we do it. And what does that actually mean? Well, I think there are three broad things, and actually the Chair has already referred to these through academic research, and we have come up with them, I suppose, through policing experience as practitioners over many years, about looking at what works. And the three things that have to influence, the three planks that influence how we do policing, that important piece is this. First of all, accountability. That we deliver policing in an accountable manner. Now that doesn't mean that I want the police officers constantly looking over their shoulder at the police ombudsman coming after them, or that I want the local district commander or area commanders worrying for days about going to a PCSP meeting with all those awkward questions they're going to get asked, or about me going to the policing board to be held to account. That is, those formal mechanisms of accountability are really important. They are the foundation blocks. But I am talking about a much wider view of accountability, about the police being able to tell their story, about being transparent, about explaining to communities why it is that after people tried to murder police officers in the Craig on Sunday night, we need to lock the street down for 2.5 days instead of 2.5 hours, as we would have done 15, 20 years ago. And that accountability bit is not so much the formal piece, important though that is, but it's the informal piece. It's telling our story. It's actually behaving in a way that we can be proud of. And that leads me to the second point. What I need police officers to do, what I want you to expect of your police officers, is that they will behave in a way that is courteous, that is respectful, and that is fair. That they treat people not all the same, because people have got diverse needs, but there is an innate fairness and equality about how we deliver the service. So if you happen to live in Crawfordsburg, in the leafy suburbs of Belfast, you're going to have the same quality of service as if you live in the West Bank and Derry. I want that equality to shine through in what we do. I want people to be treated the way, I want police officers to treat people the way they would want to be treated, or the way they would want a family member to be treated. And I want the common decency of courtesy to be expressed. Some of this is a wee bit old-fashioned thinking. My first sergeant, when I joined the police, described success to me like this. He said, George, if you can give somebody a fixed penalty notice for a road traffic offence, and they say thank you to you as they take it off you, that's good policing. That is courtesy, it's respect, it's fairness. And the third element, which again is sort of evidenced by you being here tonight, is something that I call collaborative decision making. Now that feels a bit clunky, and I'm not actually sure if those are the words that we use going into the future, because working with the policing board, we're trying to redefine and simplify the policing with the community framework. And so I've asked Emma Bond, working with the partnership committee at the board, to find the right words. But let me use my clunky words for tonight so I can explain to you what I mean. Collaborative decision making is when we make decisions together. Now this isn't the police abdicating their responsibility and trying to pass the buck to communities or to other people. I accept that there will be times in high-risk, critical type scenarios when police officers need to be trained and equipped and competent in making fast-time decisions, and they can't actually take the time to have a focus group around some very testing public order scenarios, for example. But my experience of policing is that those difficult fastball decisions are probably about 10% of the time at most. The vast majority of work that police do, the decisions that police have to make, is made in slow time. And when I talk about collaborative decisions, I am talking about true partnership working. I'm not talking about the police making decisions and then telling you about it to take your temperature on it. I'm talking about the police engaging with you so that we get better decisions. Decisions that are taken collaboratively and in partnership tend to be better decisions, They have better buy-in from all the stakeholders. They're therefore more sustainable. That is, they last, and you don't have to end up reviewing them constantly and changing them and tweaking them. Although changing one time isn't always a bad thing. But that is, I suppose, my third pillar of what good policing is, policing with the community. So, accountable policing, in the broadest sense, around openness and transparency, as well as the formal mechanisms. That piece about behaviours that we can stand tall as a police service and be proud of because we treat people properly in a respectful, courteous and fair manner. And also that we engage you, our partners, and the communities who employ us in decision making so that we're actually doing policing in partnership, because that's what works, that's what we've seen that works, that's where the evidence takes us. And actually, I don't claim any wonderful innovation or creativity around this. This is what Patton suggested. What we're trying to do is make sure that that approach drives right up from the bottom of the organisation, right up to the top. And more importantly, that approach of how we do policing applies right across all the spectrum and all the disciplines of policing. Policing with the community, as I've described it, is not just about neighbourhood officers. Neighbourhood officers are critically important. They do a great job. They provide visible reassurance. They have the time, sometimes, to engage with people and to find out community needs and to be responsive to them. But actually, I want the road policing officer to be thinking that way. I want the public order officer to be thinking that way. I want the homicide detective to be thinking that way. I want the officer who's involved in intelligence gathering to think, why am I doing this? I'm doing this to keep people safe. I'm doing this to prevent harm, to protect people, to bring people to justice. How am I doing this intelligence gathering? I'm doing it in a way that is respectful, that's fair, that's courteous, in a way that I know I'm going to be held to account. So the challenge for us as a senior team here isn't just finding a way of defining this and explaining it better and marketing it and branding it. I'm sure Emma will do a great job, no pressure on it. But that is important. But actually the real challenge that we have is not just how we present it to you, but how we mainstream it right across all the functions, all the activities of policing. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure how you follow that, but you know how I think we follow it. With youth, we go from the old, I didn't really mean that. We go from the middle-aged, is that better? To the young. My name is Debbie Waters. I'm an independent member of the Policing Board and the Vice Chair of the Partnership Committee. So I am going to facilitate the rest of the evening. What I'd like to do now is to focus on youth, because when I said we're going to do the youth piece, now I didn't mean myself. I'm not delusional, folks. I want to talk to you a little bit about a youth programme, a youth leadership programme that the board has been involved in. It's called TALK, which stands for Transformation, Advocacy, Leadership and Knowledge. And the board, along with the PSNI and the American Consulate and also the Department of Foreign Affairs, all jointly sponsored this youth leadership programme. And it was something new for us as a board, and I think something new for the PSNI to be involved in such a formal programme. I think why it's important we highlight it tonight is 12 young people were selected to go on the programme from throughout Northern Ireland. 4 of them were from your city. 4 out of the 12. So you have some amazing young people here, young people that want to tell you a little bit tonight about their journey. I am not going to say very much more about the programme, except that it's a 12-month programme. The first strand of it was a 10-day, this was such a hardship for the young people, a 10-day trip to Washington DC, and it was hard work. They spent about 6 or 7 of those days, morning to evening, in formalised training as well as doing some other things. So There are a number of people in the room at the minute who were on the programme, so I'm going to ask them all to stand just before I bring you two up, okay? So Graham, Sarah, Rebecca and Nicole, could you stand up for us, please? Give you and to join them, we also had Chief Inspector Emma Bond, who was one of the facilitators, Chief Super, is it Stephen? I'm not good with rank. You would know I'm not a police officer. Chief Superintendent Stephen Cargan, can you get to your feet as well, please? They were out in Washington. So before I invite Nicole and Rebecca up, we're going to run a short film just about the talk programme.
Well, the Council has been very pleased to get involved with the TALK program. TALK is an acronym standing for Transformation, Advocacy, Leadership and Knowledge. And it's for young leaders. We've been able to get involved with some great partners to help promote the program. So we've been able to help with a little bit of funding through a voluntary visitor program, where the group of young leaders was sent to the U.S. for about 10 days in the early part of their program, where they were able to bond, they were able to see how policing in the community is done in the U.S. and talk about issues that are on the ground here in Northern Ireland, whether that's Belfast or other parts of Northern Ireland. And so the young leaders have come back together, and they have a year-long commitment where they're working together on a program to do the rest of the talk pieces, and they're working closely on that with the policing board and PSNI as well.
Well, the talk programme started in August, and really why the policing board were involved in it was because we wanted to be part of nurturing young leadership within Northern Ireland that would help to create a different environment for policing and to make policing more easier and more effective on the ground. So that was our rationale as a policing board. We invited the PSNI to be a partner, and the American Consulate offered to fund and became a partner. So it was a three-way approach to, I suppose, working with young people predominantly from socially disadvantaged communities right across Northern Ireland.
I work as a broadcast journalist primarily, which started to work within the London Derry Bands Forum. Doing their press and publicity, I primarily worked around a document called the Meeting City Accord, which details parading within London Derry and the North West. There was a number of us from relatively neutral backgrounds but with specific leanings. There were others who were attributed to certain parties on both sides, and there were some people who didn't have political leanings but had strong opinions, but everyone had a common thread in that we work within our own communities to try and better them and educate them.
A group which is made up of 12 people, all of us come from different backgrounds. That for me is a challenge. That for me is something which I relish. As a young Republican, I essentially relish and new challenges and something which really drives me day and daily. It wasn't all that straightforward. It was actually quite uncomfortable to start trying to get my head around the fact that there was an involvement of the PSNI. But again, it's something which I think I have really developed through. It's something which I'm proud to be a part of.
We recruited in August. We did some preparation with the young people, and then at the end of September we took them out to Washington DC for a 10-day program, which they absolutely loved. But it also was hard work. We involved the young people in skills training, so they looked at leadership, they looked at mediation, they looked at the whole issue of policing, not only in Northern Ireland but in an international context. And they also began to have difficult conversations between themselves.
I look at that. There was a course facilitated by the American Institute for Peace, and it was very broad. It covered a lot. There was case studies around different areas of conflict and different kinds of conflict across the board. It was helpful getting that insight into that. But we also had conversations around facilitation in regards to debate and dialogue and mediation and conflict resolution and conflict transformation. You know, it's something which I have had very free experience with before through the different cross-community programs, but in the American Institute for Peace there was just a totally different approach because they were able and had the ability through experience with these different topics of conflict to really bring it in and to apply it in the situation here in Ireland.
I think the mediation and negotiation skills were the best ones that we learned. We did a dialogue session. I think was particularly helpful for a number of members within the group. I think without it, it would perhaps have hampered the education and the development of the group, and it allows us now to move forward. I don't think that same engagement would have been able to happen on home soil, so I think it was important that we had that neutral factor of USIP.
They're young leaders within their communities, but we would love to see some of them going on to be political leaders, to be leaders. I mean, some of them might join the police service of Northern Ireland if there's another recruitment process. So we really hope they'll be agents for change in Northern Ireland, not only in the present, but in the future, and they'll help to create a different and a better political landscape.
Working with young people is, I think, where a lot of the good work has been done. You know, a lot of the good grassroots work in Northern Ireland has been about transforming the areas, transforming mindsets in the interface areas, the deprived areas, and so working with young people is a great way to go, and our young leaders are all working with other young people.
I mean, yes, it was great getting the Washington for 10 days, and yes, it was great getting the training and getting the experience on our belt, but the real success of this group and the initiative can only be measured in the work which we do over the next 10 to 12 months back home. I think one of the key things we need to do, and one of the things which I said today at the debrief, was that the people in the room, the people who are involved in the group, have a real responsibility to get out there into our communities and to be interacting and engaging with young people in our respective local districts.
They're an excellent group of young leaders, and they've committed to the program. They're going to make tremendous strides through it, and I imagine they're all going to step their games up as they go through it, and they will be leaders tomorrow in Northern Ireland as well.
I'd like to invite Nicole up to, we're starting with you, Nicole, aren't we? Yeah. I'd like to invite Nicole up just to talk a little bit about her experiences of the TALK programme.
Judy, Mark, Debbie, Mission Nicole, Neil Lamberton, Current Fire, Fulcher, Roll Lake, and Shaw, Whittier, Gaharnot. It's a privilege on the do as Rebecca, a fair Lord Jerhan and Ranfarchi, a lake on Clara Hench. Fwy ober Yihla Tara Futa, a Tajantogin America, of the Vesta Monagin, Sablia Mosarport. Hello, my name is Nicole Lamberton, and Rebecca and I are honoured to be speaking on behalf of all participants of the TALK programme. Hosting Clark Luna, the Tourist International G Washington DC. The Memorial, the group, the Canada, Oga Gray, the Gilahis, Aintlehis, Nationalhis, Public Tani, Eberty, August, what Kionwald, and Ward Colony to Skirtnahairn, August and Service Colony to Skirtnahairn. The 12-month programme commenced with a 10-day international strand in Washington, DC. I was part of a strong group made up of 12 representatives from all shades of loyalism and unionism, nationalists and republicans, victims of the most recent armed conflict in Ireland, and leading representatives of the Policing Board and the PSNI. The United States Institute of Peace delivered and facilitated a 5-day conflict resolution programme which was designed to instill skills in us which would serve as a foundation to develop further productive relationships within both our own communities and within communities across the north of Ireland. The programme involved intense training, focusing on a number of relevant areas, including constructive communication skills, prejudice awareness and reduction, overcoming biases, dialogue for peace building, and the development of negotiation and mediation skills for resolving conflict peacefully. The training that the USIP provided has undoubtedly developed and contributed to skills and knowledge to our skills and knowledge as young leaders, which we all have every intention of applying within our communities as we promote and obtain peaceful progress. Deski Institute Sheehan Statiki Ring Station Copley, Lishin Grupa, Adakla our Kivlinch in our Hodge Bubble, August Iron Grupa, August Enidiha, and Service Polony to Skirtney Aaron, August Adakla Aspa Mooning of Polony in our Tohi. The USIP also facilitated a number of dialogue sessions, both between all members of the group regarding present-day conflict issues within our communities, and also between the group and members of the PSNI regarding issues surrounding distrust in policing. With such a diverse group, difference of opinion was repeatedly evident during these challenging dialogues, but the level of maturity and passion to make a real and lasting impact from all sides shone through in the end. We all have a genuine hope that all participants will honour the commitments we made in Washington, and I certainly intend to do so. With the support of the USIP, we all succeeded in developing a strong mutual understanding and mutual respect. The promotion of inclusion, equality and fairness are at the forefront of our aims. We are all united in agreement that we are on the right road to a lasting peace, and we are all 100% committed to ensuring we play our parts in this talk programme to the best of our abilities, with our goals at the forefront. We are aware it will be a great challenge, as incidents in the city this week have proven, but we remain confident that we can and we will act as catalysts for positive change and lasting progress in our communities, and nothing will derail us from getting where we want to go. The Lynn Cora Viogam Lamarchi McKingasa, Dirt Shilong, Gerard Nelson Mandela, the Grupa Hin Fein, agus the Grupa DUP, Sabine Nijig Nahashat. Gurbi Dogini Hain, Nadini is Tauti, Nadini is Oilasi, and Minavarto to Le Rio. During a conversation I had with Mark McGuinness, he told me that when delegations of Sinn Féin and the DUP met Nelson Mandela in 1997, he told them that the most important yet detrimental people you will ever negotiate with are your own. On behalf of all the participants of the talk programme, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to the American Consulate, the Northern Ireland Policing Board, the PSNI, the United States Institute of Peace, and the Northern Ireland Bureau. And we offer a special thanks to Debbie, Emma, and all of our nominees. We greatly appreciate the significant effort made by you all to ensure the success of the trip. We certainly all experienced an extremely eye-opening, refreshing, and challenging conflict resolution programme in Washington DC, which we feel will prove in the coming months to have been very worthwhile. Morocco Skur ar hon na Honnady Helig dun Clark Hinch, but why don't our Pia Buhis agus Molly of Words dun Consulate Americana, dun Ward Polony to Skirt na Hearn, dun Service Polony to Skirt na Hearn, dun Institute Sheehan and Statiki, dun Bureau to Skirt na Hearn, agus go Highway Debbie, Emma, agus our Nine. Is Kinship Rigarna Shivalig, or Hat Needle, the Kinship go make rat Ern Tourist, agus go Nura go Gal Shinkar, a show man, agus is Kinship go and Dushin Ogina, Kimiha, the Veg Upper go Fear Ehala, the Dog Hunkin, Futa, a Wincherman, and our Watch Bubble Hen. Go, give me a
Next, you're going to hear from Rebecca.
Hello, as Debbie said, my name is Rebecca Logan, and as you have seen from the film, I work as a journalist in the city. I was nominated to the programme by the London Derry Bands Forum, and alongside Nicole, I am pleased to represent all participants of the talk programme this evening. The Talk Leadership Programme is created to support and develop young leaders at a community-based level. Our passion for volunteering within our respective communities is one of the common threads that binds us together as a group. The international strand of the programme, which featured activities such as a facilitated group dialogue, allowed us to explore other similarities in our stories that we may never have allowed ourselves to discover had we not been given that neutral platform. Now that we have all returned home with an eye to the next year and hopefully beyond, we will build on the foundation that we have established in Washington, D.C. Both as individuals and as a team, we have already begun to visit each other's communities and various projects in order to gain a greater understanding firsthand of the different cultures and traditions that exist across Northern Ireland today. Within my own work with the Londonderry Bands Forum, we have developed projects such as the Maiden City Accord in relation with the PSNI. It relates to the parading and the marching band's activity sheet, which aims to create debate around the goal of challenging preconceptions and misconceptions through education and dialogue. During the initial rollout of the programme, the uptake has been primarily among young Catholic schools in Londonderry. There's been very positive feedback and has now been developed at Key Stage 3 level. It's currently with Minister O'Dowd for consideration. This project has served as an example of what we hope to achieve over the next year as education as a fundamental aspect within the talk programme. There will be an element of this in all of the work that we carry out. As Nicole has mentioned, the United States Institute of Peace produced a programme of events in Washington, D.C. One of these was a detailed question and answer session with the group on policing in Northern Ireland. It was facilitated by Debbie Waters, an independent member of the Policing Board, Emma Bond and Stephen Cargan from the PSNI. It was clear from these sessions that the group had a difference of opinions and experiences with regards to policing and justice, although the honesty expressed has allowed us to provide a strong foundation for developing future dialogue and debate both within the group and with members of our community organisations. In relation to this, a meeting we had with Assistant Chief Patrick Burke from the Washington DC Police Department was a hugely beneficial experience for the group. He helped us to view our past and present opinions of policing in a wider context by expressing the complexities of race, religion and language barriers within his own city. This experience will play a pivotal role in how the programme progresses over the next year for us. It allows us to begin to develop a different understanding of policing around the world outside of our own communities. This level of personal interaction, as illustrated by the lengths that the PSNI are going to normalise policing within Northern Ireland, and perhaps in a way that many within the group had never considered before. It allowed us to understand their daily workings on a community-based level, as opposed to being seen as negative or as a purely reactive force. Confidence building is a major key element of the Northern Ireland Policing Board, giving priority to outreach and engagement. This concept is largely delivered through the work of the policing and community safety partnerships. Strategic meetings with our local PCSPs will ensure that we are also able to actively engage as many young people within our own communities as possible. This education will continue as we further explore policing within the community, as well as understanding the accountability of policing groups to the community, such as the Northern Ireland Policing Board, Policing and Community Safety Partnerships, and the Police Ombudsman of Northern Ireland. All of this will be underpinned by the group's continued training on self-awareness, negotiation skills, conflict resolution and communication skills. The programme ultimately aims to combine these skills and build relationships, trust and confidence, not only between their groups and their communities, but with the PSNI as well. This mutual understanding will form the basis of our work with the PSNI and the Northern Ireland Policing Board over the course of the next year, as we work towards advising and collaborating with the police on various issues, such as policing with a community strategy. In addition, we hope to see further skills-based training and educational sessions regarding policing practices and procedures. In turn, we will act as advocates for policing within our own communities, highlighting youth issues as well as encouraging a high level of positive engagement between the young people and the PSNI. I have been fortunate enough to grow up in Northern Ireland in relative peace, therefore I have limited views on the past. Having said that, I can appreciate the importance of this and our shared troubles, but my focus both as an individual and as a member of the talk programme is to work towards a shared and inclusive future. This will influence our work over the next year. Hopefully beyond, we would like to thank you all on behalf of the talk participants for the opportunity to work towards a shared goal. And on behalf of Nicole, myself and the rest of the participants who weren't able to make it this evening, we would like to thank both the Northern Ireland Policing Board, the PSNI and the US Consulate for giving us the opportunity to take part in this programme.
I'm sure you'll agree that two very articulate young women who are not only going to be leaders in the future, but are leaders today. and as both of them said, advocates for policing and taking risks to be advocates for policing in very difficult circumstances. I commend you both, and I commend all the participants of the talk programme for standing up and taking the risk, not only to grab the opportunity, but to grab it sometimes coming from communities where policing is still difficult and the context is still difficult. So well done. Thank you. Rebecca mentioned the PCSPs, and you'll know that today we've launched a new, haven't we, Amanda, today? Launched a new recruitment drive for the PCSPs, for the new PCSPs starting in April. So PCSPs are very much an important part of the work of the Policing Board. At this stage, I'd like to invite Alderman Drew Thompson to come up and talk a little bit about the work that Derry's PCSP are doing in the whole area of confidence in policing.
Good evening, everyone. Chief Constable, ladies and gentlemen, you are very, very welcome to the historic city of Londonderry to this public meeting of the Policing Board. I'd also be remiss of me not to mention our Mayor. She's there somewhere. Brenda, you're very, very welcome, taking time out of a busy schedule to be here. I am Alderman Drew Thompson, and I am Chair of the Derry Policing and Community Safety Partnership. I am also an elected member of the City Council, representing the Democratic Unionist Party. Tonight, I will give a quick overview of the PCSP and provide some examples of how our PCSP encourages cooperation with the police. The makeup of the partnership. The PCSP is made up of 10 elected members nominated by their respective parties and council, and 9 independent members appointed by the Policing Board after a public appointments process, and 7 designated bodies to include Northern Ireland Housing Executive, PSNI, Northern Ireland Fire Service, Health, Education, the Probation Service for Northern Ireland, and Youth Justice. The PCSP also has a policing committee made up of the elected members and independent members, and this committee agrees annual targets for the local policing plan and monitors PSNI performance against these targets. This monitoring is carried out through quarterly meetings with the local area commander. The chair of the PCSP is always an elected member, and the vice chair is always an independent member, with the positions changing annually. The role of the PCSP. The role of the PCSP is set out in the Justice Act 2011, and is basically to agree local policing targets, monitor policing performances against these targets, and help to build safer, shared and more common communities. This is achieved by consulting and engaging with the community through local community safety forums, public meetings, events, Neighbourhood Watch and projects. Through this engagement, issues are identified and prioritised and included in the local policing plan or the PCSP action plan. Progress against the policing plan targets is monitored by the PCSP Policing Committee, and the action plan progress monitored by the PCSP. The PCSP delivers community safety initiatives, both directly and indirectly. Confidence in policing. The PCSP supports engagement with the police through a number of channels. Formally, we hold PCSP and policing committee meetings, both in public and in private. These provide an opportunity for the police and the PCSP representatives to engage directly with the police and to raise specific issues with the area commander. In our council area, we also engage at a neighbourhood level with neighbourhood policing teams to address community issues and responses through the community safety forums and their teams. These forums are community-led and are attended by the Northern Ireland Police, PSNI, the Northern Ireland Housing Executive, community safety wardens and community leaders. and they address localised issues. Through the forums, we currently have neighbourhood policing teams meeting regularly with the communities in the Waterside, Rosemount and Hazelbank, Bogsell Brandywell, Strathfoyle Maydown, Chantallow Gallia, Park Cloy and Eglinton. This is an innovative model which has built confidence in policing in neighbourhoods which historically had little engagement with the police. Through our small project support, we are able to provide financial support to initiatives which increase engagement with the PSI and create safer communities. This year alone, we have provided almost 180,000 of financial support to community programmes to tackle antisocial behaviour and fear of crime. Finally, we also deliver numerous joint campaigns with police and our other partners to encourage cooperation in areas such as drugs and alcohol, road safety, burglary prevention, rural safety, youth engagement and property safety. Now, some of the campaigns and initiatives that we ran, Drunkenness Awareness Campaign. The PCSP recently held a public meeting in this particular venue to raise awareness of the potentially fatal consequences of drug misuse and so-called legal highs. A meeting was arranged in response to community concerns in relation to the impact of drug misuse in the city and district. At the meeting, rather than the PCSP or police presenting, 3 mothers who had recently lost young sons as a result of drug misuse spoke of their experiences. This had a much greater impact on those attending the meeting and generated extensive media coverage on the issue both before and after the meeting. Following the public meeting, the PCSP partnered with Divert, a local drug awareness group, to deliver a campaign, "We don't take drugs, drugs take us," which again reinforced the potentially fatal consequences of drug misuse, especially among our young males. An anti-burglary campaign. Burglary remains an issue in the council area, but the majority of these break-ins are easily preventable if residents lock their doors and windows when going out. The PCSP, in partnership with PSI, delivers a bi-annual anti-burglary campaign, reminding residents to lock their properties. The PCSP has also secured finance from the Department of Justice to provide and install home safety equipment, i.e. sensor lights, oil tank locks, bin locks, central alarms, etc., to victims of crime or to vulnerable residents. Farm safety. PCSP has supported the PSI Rural Neighbourhood Team to deliver trailer marking and agricultural machinery marking events. A number of these events are held every year and provide an ideal opportunity for the farming community to meet their local police officers whilst ensuring that valuable machinery is marked to prevent theft. These events are also supported by the Ulster Farmers Union and will become increasingly important as a new council area, which will have a much larger rural community. Cage sport for youth engagement. The cage sport arena is delivered in the neighbourhoods directly by the PCSP. The provision of this diversionary tool is free and is generally booked over the summer months to combat antisocial behaviour in neighbourhoods. The cage is also used as an alternative to bonfire events during July and August and provides an opportunity for the PCSP members and the PSI officers to engage with young people in a sporting environment. Road traffic collision reenactments. The PCSP normally delivers 4 of these events per year, which involves all the emergency service and the Youth Justice Agency. The realistic reconstructions are targeted at 16 to 24-year-olds and show how easily road traffic accidents occur and how the impact of the accident can have lifelong consequences. This year, the first of these events was held at Listening College yesterday, and with the next one planned for St Joseph's College at the end of the month. I would certainly recommend these to anyone because I attended the one yesterday at Listening College, and the young people, there was 3 young people in Listening College who actually did the reenactment. One was the driver, one was the young girl who was injured, and the other one was the fatal casualty. And they performed their duties incredible. And the young people who come out, while they're getting out of school for an hour, so they were happy to come out all joyful and all the rest of it. But when they were going back in, you would have heard a pin drop as they went into the major hall and saw the videos. So I think it was very, very worthwhile, and I would recommend these to anyone. The joint promotion of the non-emergency 101 number, PCSP helped the local police raise awareness of the non-emergency number when it came into operation in March of this year. PCSP assisted in promoting the new number into communities and advised on when the number should be used. Another campaign was a no boozing on board campaign. This was a joint campaign between PCSNI, PSNI, PCSP, PSNI and Translink to raise awareness of the Travel Safe, Arrive Sober message. This campaign was launched to coincide with the T-Vital and Balsonic events and was launched following this year's emergency concerns and an event in the Odyssey. Human trafficking, PCSP supported PSNI to raise awareness of human trafficking. The event targeted landlords, hotels and taxi proprietors and provided information on the level and extent of human trafficking within the area. Student engagement. The city hosts a large number of student population, many of whom are away from home for the first time. And it is important that they feel safe and supported in what can often be a strange environment. Both PSNI and the Northern Community Safety Wardens attended freshman fairs at the University of Ulster and Northwest Regional College. This provides an excellent networking opportunity for the City Centre Neighbourhood Policing Team and the Community Safety Wardens. Neighbourhood Watch is another excellent crime prevention initiative and also encourages engagement between the PSNI and residents. There are currently 29 endorsed Neighbourhood Watch schemes in the city and district, covering almost 900 homes. The establishment of Neighbourhood Watch schemes has increased significantly in the council area over the last number of years. To keep in contact with scheme coordinators, our PCSP facilitates bi-monthly meetings with neighbourhood police officers and produces a quarterly Neighbourhood Watch newsletter. There are schemes right across the council area in the waterside, city side and rural areas. Youth engagement. Finally, Through the Lens project was delivered in Strathroy in partnership with the PSNI, PCSP and the Northern Ireland Housing Executive. The project used photography to explore the impact of antisocial behaviour and develop intergenerational relationships among residents. The project also enabled the local PSNI team to engage with residents and young people, building stronger relationships. This was another great success, and the group now intend to follow the success of this initiative by producing a DVD to raise awareness of drug misuse and legal highs. I think that would be the end of my talk, but I think you will agree that the local PCSP is very active and involved in a wide range of local initiatives. And I think that there has to be thanks given to Dermot, the manager and the staff for the help and support and the way that they organise a number of these events. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We as a board felt it was very important that we showcase the work of Derry PCSP tonight, because there's a lot of good work happening there. You saw all the projects, and I think it's very important that that work continues and is supported, and that as of April next year that we are able to continue the good work of the PCSP with maybe some existing members reappointed and some new members. But we commend you for the good work that you're doing. At this stage, I would like to invite some of our panel members up to the front. We're going to move into a question and answer session, so it's over to you guys. I'm going to invite Anne Conley, the chair of the board, to sit at the front. George Hamilton, the chief constable. And so as you can hear more about the work of the PCSP, Una Jennings, who is the vice chair of, is that right, Una? Oh, sorry, Una, sorry. I'll just call you Una, it's not okay. I moved that seat, Una, so yeah. Okay, folks, we did want this next part of the programme to be as interactive as possible, and remember that the focus tonight is on policing with the community. So before I throw it open, I'm just going to invite our panel members maybe to say a little bit about what policing with the community means to them, or some of the challenges around it. So would you mind kicking off? I think so, yeah.
Okay, well, the policing board is very, very committed to policing with the community. So one thing that the police hear day in, day out, there are various interpretations of that, I think, but we would be convinced, and having heard what we've heard tonight from the young people and the older people, that's the way forward. The partnerships with the community is the only way really to do policing in this modern age. Our concern, though, is that the budgetary cuts to the police service are absolutely huge. Not just in year, so a lot of people don't understand what that means, but being asked to find 51 million at this stage in the year, we have to say that it means, you know, a real drastic cut. And of course, we are now doing our policing plan for next year, knowing that there will be a 10% cut in what police thought we're going to get next year. But as I said at the beginning, we're not going to say what we can't do, we're going to say what we can do. And the Chief Constable and the team are still committed to policing with the community. It may look different, as he will tell you, but it will still happen. But while we are facing the cuts that we are and sending people from local areas to various flash sites night after night, it's going to become harder and harder to maintain the level of policing with the community that we have. I don't want to call it because I know people are keen to come in, but just to say on that, the PCSPs are extremely valuable. We were very concerned a couple of weeks ago when we thought we weren't going to be able to go out to recruit. Very, very worried about that, because as you've heard from Drew, and as we've seen from other PCSPs, the work which they do in their local communities is invaluable. So my plea is, when the policing plan is produced, and we're working on that at the moment, there will be policing with the community will be high on the agenda, and we would ask that the local PCSPs take that and work with their own district commander to make policing with the community work in their own area.
Okay, thanks, Anne. Chief Constable, are you happy to say just a few words?
Yeah, well, hopefully my sort of introductory comments have got it distilled for you about what I see as what policing with the community is, and it's largely that how we do policing. So whether we have 4,000 officers or 7,000 officers, we're still going to do policing with that same approach, that same mindset, within that same framework. It might take longer to get the calls, it might have an impact on how many resources are in certain places, but actually, don't forget what I said, that the what of policing is a relatively straightforward bit. It's how we do it is important, and how we need to do it is policing with the community, not policing to the community, not even policing in the community, but policing with it. And the examples that we've heard Drew outlined to us tonight are real tangible examples of how we can make communities better by working together, by working in partnership, that collaborative decision making, everybody taking joint responsibility, nobody abdicating their responsibility, no buck passing, no pointing the finger of blame, but a mature relationship where people are held to account to deliver what they said they were going to deliver on, and we can do far more together, collectively and collaboratively than we can individually. And actually that becomes even more important with the budget cuts that Anne referred to, because if we work together in a really meaningful way, it's not actually, I don't believe true partnership working is provided with funding, although we bit of money helps. The real key ingredient of true partnership working is actually information sharing. And people get all excited about the cops and information and sneaky stuff and all of that. I'm talking about is just sharing basic information about where we're spending our money, sometimes at an individual level, so that we can collectively intervene through community restorative justice or through other voluntary agencies to get the better outcome for the individual. Sometimes at a family level with social services and other community groups. Sometimes at a community level. And if we share information, if we understand where the demand is, we can actually work together in a more clever way to reduce that demand. So partnership shouldn't be, it's a key ingredient for the community. It shouldn't be seen as an optional extra. If we're really clever, the austerity will force us in to do better collaborative decision making, better partnership work.
Okay, thanks. Linda?
Well, I suppose Drew has outlined the workings of the PCSP and what I'm involved in. I'm a youth and community worker, so I work day and daily on the ground in the communities. So for me, it's about just ensuring that the community do have a say in policing and making sure that policing are accountable for the way they police our communities, and more especially police our young people.
Okay, thanks, Linda. So on that note, I'm going to throw it open, folks, and we'll take questions. Just raise your hand. Do we have someone going round? Yeah, Joanne's going round with a microphone, and we will try and accommodate all of you. So just bear with me. If you show your hand, you will get in at some stage. So who's willing to kick off? Mr. Durkin, at the back.
Thank you very much. Derry, it's actually quite difficult to think of one question given the extent of work carried out by the police service, by the policing board and by the PCSPs. I didn't know whether to touch on the budgetary pressures, the huge budgetary pressures facing the service and what implications that they will have for policing on the ground, should I focus on the sterling work being done by the PSNI in conjunction, and this is a fine example of partnership with my own department on road safety. We work particularly close with Stephen Martin on that, and it's always good to see Stephen back in the city here. But given the theme of tonight's meeting is policing in the community, I thought I would pick up on some of a comment or remark that the Chief Constable made in his introductory remarks, and that's about how you do it, how you engage with communities, how you instill confidence in the police, in communities. And you gave a specific reference, Chief Constable, to an incident earlier in the week here and there. And first and foremost, I'm sure I speak for everyone in this room, and 99.9% of the population beyond these walls, when I condemn outright the attack on colleagues of yours that occurred in the city the other night, and extend our best wishes to them and hope they recover from the undoubted shock and trauma that they are going through. But in terms of how you engage with the community following such an attack, and specifically following that attack in Craigan on Sunday night, how do you do that? How do you do that in a way that they understand their street or their estate has to be locked down for 2.5 days, as you put it? Because I know, and I'm sure I can speak for other elected representatives as well, that I've been inundated with, I wouldn't even say concerns, I would say complaints from members of the community, residents up there, good, decent people up there who have been seriously inconvenienced and seriously disrupted in their day-to-day lives. And obviously, the root of this problem is those who perpetrated the attack. However, I don't know, from your point of view, is there a way that the response could be more measured, more tempered, in a way that the community will understand?
Okay, thanks Mark. Chief Constable, over to you.
Well, thank you, Mark. It's an honour to have a minister in the meeting as well. That's useful, and I think it shows the relevance and the scale of how seriously this issue is taken in Derry. Well, I suppose, Mark, the answer to your question is, I talk about policing with the community about the accountability piece being not just the formal accountability of me and the senior team to the board and locally, Stephen and Gary and Tony and the team to the PCSPs. But I also said that the real value and accountability, in my view, is a transparency, a willingness for the police to tell their story. It's actually very challenging to do that. It's easy for me to say it. And I did say in my introductory comment I'm very open to some challenge with whether our rhetoric fits with our actions. I'm absolutely mean what I say. I also know, having done Stephen Cargan's job, for example, in a different district, but with similar challenges, that when you are literally up to your ears and you've got officers under attack and there's all of these security concerns that we can't actually ignore, both at a human level but also at a legal level, there is a need to ensure people's safety and security first and foremost. But also there's another side to this which is around the quality of investigations. I'll be surprised if in an audience such as this there isn't some reference at some point this evening to the huge pile of legacy historic investigations that we need to deal with. And whilst they're historic, I recognise up front that they're real pain for real families and real victims today, so I'm not dismissing them on that basis. But as we trawl slowly through those legacy cases, we find inadequate investigations, we find opportunities missed, we find people not getting criminal justice disclosures and outcomes because actually investigations weren't done as thoroughly, as detailed, as properly, as professionally as they should have done. Partly because we didn't know as much back then as we know now, partly because we're running from incident to incident and things that frankly the jam was spread too thin. So part of the time scale that is involved in the Craigan, for example, is making sure that we do a proper job that the public would expect us to do in terms of the investigation of serious crimes such as that horrible attack on the community, and specifically on a number of our officers. But I agree with you, the challenge is, if that is a justification for it, as I have just outlined, another part of the problem is actually how we get that out there. And I actually think that this is where we need, in the middle of a crisis, to be taking the time to engage with community representatives, to be getting community representatives to become advocates or explainers of policing, not to remove the accountability from the police, but actually so that that message starts to get explained. So the Unity of Purpose group, for example, that met with some of the partnership committee earlier, it's probably too high a level that actually for what I'm talking about, but building a tiered level of communication networks right across the city, right across the district, that will actually start to explain this. Not just explain it in terms of telling the community what's happening, important though that is, but actually becomes a conduit back in, so that through the representatives, there is an opportunity for challenge, for suggestions about how to do this better, quicker, and all the rest of it to come back in to shape the police response. Because that's what engagement's about. It's not just, giving people an opportunity to vent. Important though that is at times actually, but it's about listening to people so that the policing response can be shaped by their concerns, by their observations. Because communities actually, and individuals within communities, sometimes have a better answer than we have, and we need to be listening to that.
Okay, thanks George. Mark, happy enough? Okay, we've 3 people waiting to come in. We've the gentleman at the back, stand beside Joanne. If you could just introduce yourself and tell us who your question is directed at.
My name is Charles Lumberton. My question, I suppose, is directed at the panel. It's a follow-up on Mark's question around Craig being locked down for 2.5 days. It actually wasn't. For the first maybe 18 hours after that attack, there was nobody in Craig, and there seemed to be a total disregard for the residents and people that in Craig. Then it was locked down for over 24 hours. So I understand completely what the Chief Constable was saying around information sharing, but there was no information. There was no communication into the community. There was no information to the residents while the operation was taking place. And to be honest, you talk about retrieving information and evidence and all that. And that period between the attack and when the police arrived in Craig, I am sure there was a lot of tampering and contamination, whatever language you want to use. So, to be honest with you, there seemed to be, from my point of view, and the people that I was talking to, Craig, and I did talk to some of your senior team in the area about it, there was a number of things. First off, there was no response in the Craig, there was no consideration for the residents of Craig, but more importantly, when it did take place, it seemed like a collective community punishment. And the conversation I had yesterday, it says, in the 80s and the 90s, that's what was going on in this community, collective punishment. And see, if we come back to those days and those days of thinking, we're going in the wrong direction.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Chief, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, we have a number of the local. Gary, maybe you're on the way now.
Sorry, just to say something.
No, we have a number of the local senior police commanders in the room tonight, and I think the important thing from my point of view as the leader of the organisation is that we listen to that, because we can provide explanations. It's right that we're answerable, but it's really important as we take policing into a new era, a new dispensation, and we've already come on a long journey, but it's critically important that we are sensitive to community perceptions, to community experience. It's critically important that we learn the lessons of yesteryear and we don't make the same mistakes again. And what I'm hearing from you is that there is a feeling that that's exactly what we're doing. I'm listening to that, I'm taking it seriously. I want you to have conversations with Tony Callum and Gary Eaton, maybe ever comes back, and Stephen Cargan, because actually these things get fixed through relationships at a local level. Now, I actually am a wee bit torn in this because the impact on the community is important. What we're about is serving the community. We're here to serve the community. We're public servants. But actually, I also have 4 officers who came very close to losing their lives on Sunday night. And we know how these anti-peace, violent, dissident groups work. And we know that more often than not, there will be a second device left, there will be a follow-up attack, and all the rest of it. And without wanting to set out making excuses, because I'm acknowledging up front that there are issues there that we need to address, and we will address them. We will listen to you, and we get better at doing this. But actually, we all also need to put safety first. And the sort of powerful words that you're using in that question that trouble me is collective punishment of the people of Craigin for what happened. That's the perception, that's a worry for me. I can say hand on heart, having spoken at length to the people in this room who are the local police leaders, that certainly wasn't the intention. But if that's the effect that we're causing, and we're not communicating so that those views are dealt with, we need to do better, and we need to listen to you, and we need to go together on this journey, because I don't claim to know this city particularly well. Every experience I've had in it, every piece of engagement I've had in it, I know that 99.9% of this city are supportive of the police. It doesn't mean that it's unconditional support, but I know that they're supportive of the peace process. I know that they are not in the same place as those who are opposed to peace and prepared to use violence to deliver a political and ideological perspective. Those days have gone. If communities have moved, police need to be moving, the police need to be sensitive to the community view of police action. And if we haven't been in this case, we want to learn and we want to do better.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Just to remind you that there's some tweets coming in, and Sean at home has said it's great getting to watch live. So remember, if you are watching at home, you can tweet us at any time. I'm going to ask Una a question that's coming in. Una, PCSP is doing some good work in Derry. Do you think you're getting anywhere?
I'm not sure, does that mean it's the PCSP?
PCSP, not you and your youth work, but the whole body as a PCSP, because I'm sure you're fabulous people.
Wonderful. Yeah, there's a lot of work on it. I've only been a member of the PCSP for a year, and even in the year that I've been a member, I've seen a lot of work and a lot of funding of these small community groups who struggle to do interventions at peak times during the summer. And so there has been a lot of work done on the ground with the PCSP, and the community safety partnerships are really important in informing what's going on in our own communities and giving us a chance to feed in to people who are making decisions about the community.
Okay, thanks, Una. A question for you that's come in. People out there are very impressed with the TALK programme. Do you think the board will run another TALK programme?
Well, I hope the board will run another TALK programme. I think what we've seen tonight shows the way forward. I had the benefit of meeting with all of the young people before they left for Washington, and it was already clear that they had established good relationships, and as they articulately said, it's not about the Washington trip, it's about what they do when they come back here. And I think we need more young people to have that experience, because the way forward is for Northern Ireland and for the country as a whole is for young people to be skilled and move forward in leadership. So I hope so. We will have to keep very good relationships with the American government, and I think Gabrielle is here tonight,
yeah.
And I know they're very committed. So here's hoping.
Okay, thanks, Anne. We have 3 people waiting to come in. One of them is Jerry O'Hara, policing board member. So Jerry, before I bring you in, can I just say to people that there are other board members in the room tonight, and I just want to say to you, feel free to come in the discussion at any time. We've Katrina Ryan in the room, we've Trevor Lunn, we've Brenda Hale, we've Joan O'Hagan, we've Pat Sheehan, and we've Bryce Dixon, all members. I think you're all members of the Partnership Committee. So feel free to join in the discussion at any stage. Jerry, you have a question?
It's not really a question, it's more of a comment. I'll pose a question, George, before the end of it. Why not just fáilte go roh like Budera? Agus tá frasal Maier and Prenue agus Tahas or Shanaka. I didn't actually, I wasn't really touched on the incident in Craig because I thought we were going to deal that at the board. But I think first of all, I should start off by reiterating the comments that we're all very grateful that no one was injured, and we can condemn this. I don't think condemnation is enough. I think we have work to do, and I'll come back to that. Just in the case of areas like Craig, Republican neighbourhoods who have had a checkered history with policing in the past. There's a battle of hearts and minds going on in those districts, and every incident becomes a site of struggle, and how we deal with it determines whether we succeed in that battle for hearts and minds or don't. And you can do good policing 90% of the time, and it's the time that you don't do good policing is when we give ammunition to people who are opposed and you begin to do policing. So I think we probably have the moral high ground in the aftermath of the attack, and I think we lost that high ground over the course of the next 30 hours, and that's coming directly from people who, some of whom I work with, who live within doors where the accident happened and had to negotiate their way in. So I just think we need to be really, really mindful, really sensitive that all of these incidents provoke a situation where we can either do good for policing or make a mistake, and that needs to be, I think, reiterated. Patton, it's a symbol of Canada, Patton. It was policing with the consent of the community, really. And policing with the consent of the community is, and the PCSPs are a central part of doing that. And I think that takes us to a level of policing that maybe, and I understand there's been a culture and a history which hasn't led us to be cognizant of that. But policing with the consent of the community requires a lot of consultation, requires meeting with community leaders, and you're right. Community leaders on the ground can solve a situation very quick if they're consulted, if they're respected, if they're listened to. And I'm not sure if that happened in Craigan. So I think we need to be, it just needs to be driven as a central position within the policing. I'm reassured, and this is the question, I'm reassured that your commitment to PwC is there, whether you have 7,000 or 4,000. What has bothered me as a member of the policing board is that the budget allocation and the resource allocation doesn't always reflect that commitment. And it should be a thing that goes across all aspects of policing, but neighbourhood policing and the policing of the community as we see it, the allocation, the resource allocation doesn't reflect it as a priority. And there are other departments within policing that I think have, and priorities are reflected in budget allocation, no matter what we say. So I would like to actually see some commitment to bringing that resource allocation towards policing the community, neighbourhood policing, and the balance with all of the other functions of policing, and they're not in balance at the moment. I had the privilege, and Debbie has done a great job on the talk programme, and wheeled me on to an interview panel, so I had the privilege of interviewing Rebecca and Nicole, and I have to say, I was in the interviews for about 7 of the people, including 4 from the city here, and it was, I have to say, I had great pride in the people who turned up for interview and how they performed and how they conducted themselves. And I'm even more prouder when I hear both of these young ladies standing up there tonight and being more articulate than most of the people in the room who really followed them. So let me congratulate Debbie on the programme. Let me thank the American Consulate. Emma was on the panel as well, and the 2 ladies and the other participants. I think it was a great operation, and we do need to keep on the consulate and make sure we do it year on year. So, Tim Bishop,
Okay, thank you. The question that I'm getting in there is, Jerry, the question I'm going to put to him anyway, resource allocation, that's the one. George, before you speak, resource allocation against policing with the community, and a question has come in around this. Can I say, if she's watching, you cannot get away from her. Kula Yasuma has said to the question, how can the PSNI build relationships with communities when there are less and less neighbourhood officers? So that also alludes to Jerry's question around resource allocation against policing with the community, and people perceive that as being neighbourhood policing. So talk to us a little bit about your views and your intent around that.
Okay. I'm getting all the easy questions. Policing with the community is a mindset. It's an ethos. It's a lens through which policing is delivered that is sensitive to, it sees the needs of communities. Policing with the community is not just about neighbourhood policing officers, albeit I accept that neighbourhood policing officers by and large do a great job. They are the front-facing piece of a policing service, and therefore they're a critical, vital component part of policing with the community. But policing with the community is the framework for all policing delivery, whether that's in the world of road policing, or public order policing, or whatever, in the intelligence world, the whole gambit needs to be engulfed in this mindset. And I think we have a bit of work to do to get there. And that's the context in which I said, whether there's 4,000 of us or 7,000 of us, we need 4,000 people with that mindset. And actually, that's a bit exclusionary because there's a couple of thousand police staff many of whom engage directly with the public, whether that's a crime scene investigator in the Craigan or wherever. The perception that they leave the community with is just as important as the sworn officer. So it's actually more than the sort of 6,500 police officers we have. So that's what I mean. I'm not being dismissive of we'll be able to keep doing everything the way we've done it with less people. But the piece that me and the senior team are absolutely determined to drive through, and I've given commitments to the board, and I've been given jobs on the basis of this, is that we will drive that mindset through the entire organisation. You're going to get that leadership from us. And what even next year with the 10% cuts, Drew Harris, the deputy, keeps reminding us that in pure headcount terms, we're going to lose 1 in 7 people. Now, I'm not saying it will translate into that, this is illustrative. We still have 6 out of 7 people to deliver a policing service, and it's still a huge capacity, and we are determined to do a good job, not just in what we do, but how we do it. To come on more specifically then to how the cuts will impact neighbourhood policing teams, because this is important, and we need a bit of honesty and integrity around this. The breadth and depth and the immediacy of the cuts, the speed of the cuts, are such that no aspect of policing is going to be unaffected by it. I can't sit here and pretend that anybody is going to get ring-fenced or not be impacted. All aspects will be. But what we need to do is get back to some first principles. And we have the best blueprint for policing in the world in the Patton Report. I get frustrated, I get angry when people talk about we're in the post-Patton era. Nonsense. The Patton job isn't yet finished because it's about mindsets as well as structures and all the rest of it. But in the Patton Report, 175 recommendations, a couple of hundred pages, a really useful report that is used in academia and used by policing practitioners all across the world now. There is one reference in one diagram to response policing. Patton's vision wasn't that policing with the community would be little pockets of neighbourhood policing officers who wore high visibility jackets and didn't do too much night shift. And in some places, that's what we have built it into. We're not in dismissal, there's some neighbourhood officers do a cracking job, but it was never supposed to be a specialism. Neighbourhood policing was envisaged in Patton as being the primary model of service delivery. And response gets one reference in the whole document. Now, we have, and this is a leadership challenge, this is not criticism of response officers or neighbourhood officers. What we have done as a police service is created a model where we have made neighbourhood policing almost a specialism, when actually neighbourhood policing and policing with the community needs to be the primary model for delivering the policing service. That's what we need to get to. And in the cuts, in the austerity that we're now facing, we're going to have to reorganise and rebuild the organisation. And instead of rebuilding it away from neighbourhood policing, I want to rebuild it back towards neighbourhood policing being Patton-esque, being that primary model of service delivery. So that when you have a call for service, in your hour of need, when the burglary happens, when your window gets broken, when there's antisocial behaviour in your street corner, you're not getting a response crew coming with a long list of jobs to get to and picking them off one by one, but you're actually getting the deployment of a local officer who has a local ownership of the area, knows the area and is known in the area. Because that form of neighbourhood policing is what Patton envisaged. And we have allowed that view to become a bit distorted into something that is seen as a bit of a specialism. And I think that has been a bit of mission creep that we as a senior team now need to rise to the leadership challenge of making sure in the middle of the austerity, in the middle of the cuts, we use this as an opportunity to get back to reinforcing that policing of the community ethos, and that neighbourhood policing becomes the primary model for delivery of policing services.
Okay. Thanks, Chief Constable. I'm sure there'll be more questions about that and more discussion with the board on that issue over the months to come. I have 3 people waiting to come in, but let me bring in a question that has been tweeted in. Anne from Armagh is asking, Why has no one been arrested or charged and then given a hefty fine and or sentence for fuel laundering? The whole issue of fuel laundering in the public domain.
Well, it is a good challenge. The responsibilities for this rest with another agency. We support Revenue and Customs in their efforts around this because it is linked to organised criminality. And but actually, we are a supporting agency. Revenue and Customs do their piece, like everybody else. They have to prioritise their resources against where their enforcement activity. I don't want to either start defending them or making excuses for them. I think the piece that we need to be tuned into is that there are links between fuel laundering and organised criminality. The bit that Revenue and Customs are very good at, and they do it with our support, and there is a good partnership working on this, is that whilst fines are wonderful, arrest, charges and going to prison can send a message. The way to really tackle organised criminality is to deprive them of their assets and their money. And that's what Revenue and Customs are pretty good at, is seizing and dismantling fuel laundering plants. I think it would be better, it would be nicer if there were more criminal justice outcomes rather than just the seizure of the kit and the product. But that's where we are. As I say, I'm proud of the work that we do with Revenue and Customs, but I don't want to either defend them or make excuses for them.
Okay, thank you. We've three women and a gentleman waiting to come in. We have Katie, Catherine Cook at the back, then Katrina, lady at the front, and then this gentleman. So as you know, I've seen you. There's 4 people waiting to come in. Katie?
Thank you, David. My question, my name is Catherine Cook and I'm an independent member on the PCSP. And my question is around the use of language. Because when you talk about engaging with communities, people are left thinking that that's Bobby's on the beat. It's visible policing, and we know with all the cuts that that's not going to happen. So maybe we could have a play on language and talk about communicating with communities. So if somebody rings in and they're expecting police out, communicate with them and say, we haven't got anybody, they're on their way to Oma, or they're on their way to Strabane, or they're dealing with something else, they'll not be out until tomorrow, so that we don't have a victim who is sitting at home waiting on the police to come. So I think there's a piece of work there that needs to be done, and it's more than engaging with the communities, it's communicating back to the communities.
Okay, thanks Catherine. Any comments?
I think it's a fair challenge. What we have tried to do, certainly at a senior level, to lead by example, is to have a bit of integrity, to be honest, to deal with people's expectations around the budget cuts. There's been some flack around that. I've been accused of being political, and I think it was been factual and all the rest of it, but that's at a very senior level. The more important bit is actually that we're honest and we're communicating and we have integrity at a local level in service delivery. So if somebody rings in and their call genuinely isn't an emergency and we're not going to get there until the neighbourhood team starts at 3 o'clock tomorrow, we should tell them that, we should deal with their expectations, and we should try to give them some reassurance by phone. So I don't disagree with anything that's been said. I think it's a valid challenge, and I'm sure my local colleagues are listening. They're nodding at least.
Okay, thank you. Before I bring Katrina in, another question's come in for Anne, and it's again around resources. So there's a lot, obviously, that's very topical at the minute. What is the board's role in ensuring the PSNI has sufficient budget to deliver effective policing, and can things be done differently?
Well, the board has a role to ensure that the PSNI deliver effective policing irrespective of the budget, because that is the role of the board, to hold the police to account for what they do. But it's also the role of the board to ensure that the police deliver effective and efficient, which is where the money comes in. In my previous existences, I've actually had to take on roles where money was drastically cut, first in education and then in library services. And I can vouch for the fact every time we ended up with a better service. We did have to go through a lot of public consultation and all of that. So the role of the board is to ensure that the police make the best use of the resources that they have. And that does mean challenging some of the areas that they work in, looking at how they use the money, and which we do, and the Resources Committee is very strong on that, and making sure the money goes to where it is needed. And I think we come back to the policing plan, because we did get into some discussion last week about how do we deliver the policing with the community, albeit in a different way, and how do we match that up with the funding and the money. The board is also role in fighting for the money, and we were meant to go to Washington for a couple of days with the young people, but we didn't go because it was our role to be in Stormont with the Department of Justice saying this can't be done, we can't manage on this money. So there's a role in advocacy, but there's a role in ensuring that, irrespective of the budget, that we get the best value for money from the police, and that areas that maybe are not as effective are cut, and that the money goes where it needs to be.
Okay, thank you. Katrina, I'd like to bring you in. Joanne has the microphone there for you.
Very well, Debbie. I was touching on people, the name and live enough near Colin. It's lovely to be here in Derry tonight, and I would just like to congratulate our young people who spoke. It's good to see our young women so articulate. A comment and then maybe a question. And just one brief comment, and George will know, we've had a robust debate about budgets, and I know from my time in departments, the leader can set priorities. You can cut the easy things, or you can fight for what's important. And I suppose the message that I'm hearing here tonight, we need to fight for resources for policing with the community, because I agree with you, it's a mindset, but it's a mindset that has to be matched with resources. And the accountants in your organisation will explain why you can't match resources and that there are no resources. There are resources. You have to find them.
I'm not laughing at your question, Katrina. I'm laughing at a conversation that we had with the accountants about 13 hours ago, which reflected the observations that you just made. So I'm hearing you, and I've no doubt we'll revisit this many times, and you'll hold me to the account in meticulous fashion about whether I do what I say I'm going to do.
Okay, I had many of those with my financial advisor in the Department of Education, and it's about choices and right choices. The second part of my comment or question, we're talking about policing with the community, and for me, community is diverse. It's people who have come to our country from other countries, and we want to make sure that they feel safe. It's about women who are suffering violence. It's about our LGBT community. So my idea of community is a very diverse community, and I wonder would Anne or Una, who is a youth and community worker, or George, like to make any comment on how we protect our vulnerable communities. And I am very aware one of the cases in Derry where there was a very serious hate crime, and where there's a young family man who can just move his eyes. And I know the family to date aren't happy with the response. So I leave that with you.
Okay, Katrina, thank you. I'm going to take a question from this lady here as well, and then ask the panel to address both questions. Yeah, Joanne has the microphone there. If you could tell us your name and then your question.
My name is Michelle Gallagher. I'm a resident in Rosemount. As Stephen Martin, Stephen Carbon, Garrett and Tony are all aware, we have a terrible problem with anti-social behaviour in our area.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask the Chief Constable, you spoke about our community police officers area. How are we going to be flexible with our community police officers in the future? Are we going to lose them? Are we going to have them cut? What's going to happen with that? I'd also like to say that I think it's time that you got some of your budget back again from Tulare Avenue and such like. It's time to move that on. You're losing a lot of your budget on that. I think your budget's being cut bad enough without that having any more taken into it with that. Is there any way to move that on?
Okay, Michelle, thank you. So we've three issues there really. We've one question for the whole panel around diversity, hate crime, race hate crime. And just to touch on Katrina's question, with the issue of antisocial behaviour and with the cuts and neighbourhood policing, how would you address antisocial behaviour? And then where there are pockets and places that are draining the money out of the budget, how can those situations like Twiddell be addressed or moved on? So.
Well, Angela, and Katrina, thank you for the questions. There are challenges in there, and that's good, that's what tonight's about. I think the issue around antisocial behaviour, that affects people's quality of life. It's important to communities, therefore it should be important to the police. And what we're going to have to do is hold firm to the principles of pattern and policing with the community, but also reorganise ourselves in a way that is entirely responsive to what's important to the communities with less budget. And I think money has been taken off us that is presenting huge challenges, but we still have a lot of capacity and a lot of money to spend. And it's important that we redesign our structures so that we put the priority, the police resource to where the community priority is. And that has to be the primary focus. We also have some statutory responsibilities that we must fulfil that communities may not necessarily agree with the statute. Well, I would say blame the politicians on that one, because actually it's a pretty good idea for the police to stay within the law and to be compliant with the law. So first and foremost, we do have some statutory responsibilities we need to fulfil, but over what we have got discretion on where we put our resources, that has to be us putting our resources to what's important to communities. And I think, coming back to this question about neighbourhood policing teams are the solution to antisocial behaviour, I think a policing response has to be one of taking antisocial behaviour seriously. Drew Harris, the Deputy Chief Constable, is leading on the change process, and I can't remember who said, I think it was the Chair, said earlier that actually this sort of financial crisis also creates an opportunity to force people to think differently and think better. I was talking in education and library services about pretty severe cuts actually resulting in a better service in the end, a more efficient and more effective service. And that's the challenge that we have, that the Deputy Chief Constable is leading on, and that's where we want to get to. We want to be showing leadership and to be positive about this, and that's where we're hoping to get to. And it goes back to my comments earlier, we get hung up between the division between response and neighbourhood policing, what's a specialism and what's protective and all of that. We need people to operate in a way that's sensitive and responsive to community needs and expectations. That's what Patton envisaged, that's what we want to do, and we have to redesign this organisation called the Police Service in Northern Ireland in a way that delivers on that, not just cutting big chunks of cost out of here and there in an unthought out way, but actually to really intelligently look at what are our statutory obligations, what's the community priorities, how do we reconfigure the reduced resource base that we'll have to best meet those responsibilities. I'm sorry, the Twiddell issue, I would like to see it resolved. Some of this stuff, to be honest, is outside of the control of policing. The board and our internal auditors and our external auditors and others hold us to account for where we use our money. I'm not saying we get that right every time, but the level of scrutiny that we've applied into policing that protest and parading issue at our down in Twiddell has been pretty extensive. So we've taken the cost down over the last 400 plus days from £43,000 a night to £22,000 a night. But that is based on our assessment of the risk, and we can't pretend it's different than it is. Each notification for the protest activity, each evening is for about 700-800 people. Some nights there's 60 people there, some nights it spikes to 600 people. So we have to be in a position to fulfil our statutory obligation to uphold the Parades Commission determination. Some elements in the community don't agree with that, they don't like the legislation, that is political, that's not for me to comment on. It's in statute, and I will do my duty under the law to deliver on that. The other issue, and then we'll hand over to other panel members, about the diversity of the communities that we represent. I agree with what Katrina says around her definition of community. I think in 2014 it would be almost impossible for anybody with any degree of objectivity not to come to a similar definition of a very diverse community with diverse needs. There's two challenges for us in that. One is to realise that when we talk about community, we're not talking about a homogenous group. We're not talking about a one-size-fits-all. That would be stereotyping. We need to recognise difference within community. When I talk about putting the resource and being responsive to community expectations, it has to be to a diverse range of community expectations and needs, because the various groups, particularly the minority groups that Katrina mentions, will have different needs to broader, wider, more indigenous groups, for example. That's one point. The other point is a key one that is a real challenge when we're not recruiting, and it's one that we do get our toes held to the fire by the policing board about quite a bit, and quite appropriately, is one of representativeness. I want this senior leadership team in this room from the police service tonight, want our workforce to be representative of the community that we serve. And that's not just because we believe in equality, that we do, but it's actually, if we seriously want to police with consent, if we seriously want to increase and maintain or even increase confidence in policing, we need to be representative of the communities that we serve. Apart from anything else, there are operational benefits to that. How can you make policing decisions if you don't have the full range of diverse thinking within your teams? So it worries me, for example, that whilst I'm very blessed with the quality of the service executive team that I have, but apart from Liz Young and Donna Scott, who are the heads of legal services and corporate communication, it's an entirely male team. And great people, challenge each other, lots of diverse thinking, but actually it's pretty much male dominated. And we need to, the board actually, did you appoint the top team? Need to fix that. But actually the important bit is that is because it's right to be representative for representative's sake, but it's also right because you make better decisions if your thinking is diverse and your thinking is representative of the people you're trying to serve.
Okay, I'm trying to brief. In terms of the issues you raised in the Belfast area, I quite agree. I think we need a political solution, but we need that money and those resources back, because the kind of issues you're talking about, antisocial behaviour, which is not classed as a crime, can be set back and not looked at because officers are not there to deal with it, because they've been called away to deal with what might happen in other areas. Short of putting a skirt on senior staff, we need to grow the women, and it was good to know that at the last graduation there were quite a number of females coming through, and we have to try and encourage them to go through the ranks. I suppose just briefly say, how do we deal with all of this, is I think we're back to PCSPs, because we've had a situation in the past where we've set a policing plan, and every single group in Northern Ireland, every umbrella group, be it from victims, be it children and young people's groups, all want a specific target for their particular area. Now, the policing board plan at top level can't do that. It should set high level priorities for policing and say policing with the community is the overarching thing, and we want you to reduce crime and increase detection or whatever. It then is up to the local PCSPs to customise that for their areas, because in Rosemount antisocial behaviour is a big issue. It's a big issue where I live, but drugs might be a bigger issue somewhere else. Hate crime may be a very big issue somewhere else. So the local commanders have got to look with the PCSPs at the overarching targets of the policing board set and say, yeah, but in my area, Burglaries are not the big issue, it's whatever it is. And that's what we would love to see. The situation where we've got very strong philosophy and priorities for policing across Northern Ireland, but for the local, and there'll be 11 PCSPs in the future saying, in our area, here are our priorities, and here's how we will contribute to reducing crime and how we will help police to detect the people who commit crime.
Okay, thanks. We have a question that's come in from Una, and then we have a couple more in the audience, and then that's us done because it's almost 9 o'clock. So 2 gentlemen have been waiting very patiently. If you could, and there's somebody else here. Three gentlemen waiting very patiently. There's one gentleman here, one beside Joanne, and then one at the back. We'll take your questions all together. So would you like to kick off? You've been very patient.
Thank you very much.
Just tell us your name so as we can talk to you.
It's I'm James McCauley, and father of Paul McCauley. Paul was the subject of a sectarian attack in 2006. My question, which will be a general question, but it touches so many aspects that we're talking about here today, the quality of policing and engagement with the communities. And the first investigation had ran for a number of years, for 5 years, and it was the family had discovered the weakness of it. And then we approached a member of the policing board, and rather than go to a meeting like this, we had a meeting with the district commander, and they promised us and carried out a 3-month review, which resulted in a 75-page report with 42 recommendations. So I think when in detail that highlights that the first investigation was considerably weak, and maybe at odds with the picture you're trying to paint tonight. I mean, I fully support the rosy picture the Chief Constable is now painting, but there are always exceptions. And this case, I think, highlights a serious undercurrent that hasn't been addressed in the city. And in this particular case, it was an organised gang had crossed the city, had invaded a private barbecue, and 2 people were left seriously injured. Sadly, the worst was my son, who had his skull smashed with his head was jumped upon. About 6 square inches of his skull remained missing, and the only protection from his brain and the outside world was a black skin. He is in a vegetative state, and we feel that it is one of the worst crimes committed in the city. Yet, 8 years on, there is no satisfactory outcome for PSNI. Part of that problem is the liaison with the communities that these people have retreated into, and there is substantial support for those people within the community. They may hold those communities in a certain amount of fear, because at the time that Paul was attacked, we got several letters of support from the Protestant community. We couldn't return a thank you because the letters were anonymous. They were simply saying a Protestant family or a Protestant family around in Derry. So we have a killer gang for the past 8 years, free to roam the streets of Derry, because Paul was left for dead. Nobody helped him. He was resuscitated 3 times later. So my question is that in a serious crime like that, how do you prioritise resources and indeed quality of personnel? Because obviously the lack of prosecution today for attempted murder is due in part to the initial weak selection and appropriate resources of the team that was investigating, and obviously the current team, which was upgraded to serious crime, are at a loss because of the gap in time, 5-year gap in time before it was held to them. So have things changed from the point of view of identifying priorities for serious crime?
Okay, James. Thank you. We're going to take that question and then the 2 others. Yeah. Chief Constable, would you like to respond to that question about James' son's Paul and about prioritising resources, and how do you ensure a quality response in an era of decreasing resources?
Well, The story is a devastating one, Mr. Macaulay, and I am familiar with it. The previous role was actually a job that Stephen Martin, who was originally district commander, is now doing, and Stephen had made sure I was aware of it, that I was linking in with my colleagues to try to do some damage limitation, frankly. In that case, it's a tragic, devastating story, and I'm sorry that not more people have been brought to justice for the suffering that your son and your family have had to endure over the last 8 years. And in some ways, to say much more, like go across as trite or excuses, I just want to make one high-level principle. The major investigation team, number 5, that has worked on this, the review team that worked on it, that came up with those 40-odd recommendations, the 15 arrests that have been made as a result of that review work, and perhaps there would have been a better criminal justice outcome if all of that had been done better and earlier. All of that work is pretty much invisible policing. It isn't the neighbourhood officer in the high visibility jacket on the streets. It's actually detectives sitting, ploughing through CCTV, checking telephone records, sitting in the ambulance custody suite, interviewing people for days on end, doing the house-to-house inquiries and all that. And it's important work. There's a statutory responsibility on us to do it. Morally, as citizens, as parents, as most of us are, we want to do it because it's the right thing to do. And all I'm saying is that, first of all, your story is devastating. I'm sorry for the length of time that has passed, and we haven't had the criminal justice outcomes that we want. But this story also represents to us the complexity of the challenge of carving up policing resources between the serious and the invisible, and the quality of life issues that require a visible response. And I'm not asking for sympathy for the police for that. The only sympathy in this room tonight should be for Mr. Macaulay, Paul and his family. But I do think it is almost a good case study of the challenge that faces all of us in how we take policing into the future, where we need to fulfil those responsibilities. Part of the reason for the delay in the Craigan and the police response, or the police releasing the scene, was that we were trying to do a professional job and grab every cell of DNA evidence that's available to us and all the rest of it. And I'm not trying to justify it on that basis, but we're trying to learn as we go here about doing a professional, credible, good policing job. And this story, devastating and tragic though it is, represents the dilemmas that we face in trying to carve up the resources. So that will be a priority for us. And the redesign of the organisation, so that actually you don't have this big gap between what is district investigators at the moment and the serious crime branch investigators, but that it is more of a blurred line actually, so that things can move from a local response to a more specialist response quicker and easier and in a more common sense way, will be part of the redesign that the Deputy Chief Constable will be doing.
Yeah, but can that what lessons have been learned from that investigation?
Well, I think that we have a number of review mechanisms that are built in for these serious crime offences, so that we wouldn't have to wait until an elected member comes with a distraught father and a suffering family to the district commander on the basis of good relationships to get action, but that actually there's a systematic 28-day review for cases of murder and cases such as your son's tragic case, where the quality of the investigation is reviewed actually in 10 days with a first cut of what we call a peer support group, where independent senior investigators with experience would come in and look at that. In 28 days, that review report that you got would be commissioned. That's completed within a 6-week period. The Assistant Chief Constable, Crime, would then chair a meeting and decide how that's going to be taken forward and double check. It's a safety net, if you like, to make sure that the resources are in the same way. But that's the current system. We don't want to lose the rigour that's been built into that, but we also need to probably make the lines more coherent between local district investigators and the specialist investigators in serious crime branch. You shouldn't need to wait until your case gets to a certain threshold or representations have been made from eloquent politicians before you get the quality response. That needs to happen in a professional, accredited way right from the word go.
Mr McCauley, I'm sure the Chief Constable would be willing to talk to you afterwards, but the big issue is lessons learned and what are we doing differently now. We were supposed to end at 9, folks. I hope you don't mind if we go on for 5 more minutes. There are 2 gentlemen that have been waiting very patiently, and I really appreciate you coming out and want to give you an opportunity. Gentleman over here and gentleman at the back.
Good evening, Chief Constable. It's good to see you in the first city in the northwest, and hopefully we will see you more often in the future, along with the policing board, and maybe a bigger room and more public people here. My talk is about community policing, and first of all, I would like to commiserate with the McCauley family and their problems, and hopefully that in the near future they will all get some redress to their problems. And I'm sure we all hope that as well. The first thing is that I'm Martin McCartney, is the name, chairperson of Maydown Community Association and joint chair of Strathmore Maydown Community Safety Forum. I would like to get back earlier on tonight because it states about community policing, and I would like to endorse what Charlie Lambert and Mark Hitch and Jerry O'Hara said earlier on. I originally came from Cregan and spent all my formative years during all the troubles there, and I felt that the operation the other night, which heinous as it was, and thankfully nobody was seriously injured. I've talked to people, and I live near hand there, when I wasn't at Cregan, and unfortunately the repercussions of the close down 18 hours afterwards has caused a lot of aggro, and it has also caused, we all know the young kids can be easily engaged in riot and that. We can see that from the ages of the ones that were arrested. But I know people there that have been very supportive of the police, of community policing, and they feel totally alienated now by the after effects of that. And as one said to me today, he says, Mark, do you ever remember the drum band? He used to say 1 step forward and 2 back. He says, what happened the other day is no steps forward and 12 back. That's how bad that application of the handling of the whole situation was. Now, going back to community policing, and there's a few people out here that will know from last year or so, I've always been very much on the back of the lack of community policing. And I've always have said that the previous organisation under that, who came over here on the back of community policing, was actually responsible for the decline in the community policing. As I said, I'm from Maydown, and we used to have a local police station out in Eglinton, and that was one of the ones over a year ago. It was closed down due to lack of funding and one thing and another. Our community police team has been moved to the water side, and I've also endorsed what Catherine Cook says earlier on about the engagement with the local people and letting people be more aware. You have said that we need to get away from the policeman and the high visibility outfit because of the cutbacks in policing and one thing and another. One thing that we have found, and I'm sure a lot of districts in the town have found, when you have community policemen that are identified by the local people, and has happened in instances in the rural area where we are, if you get an incident where you get local police attendant, they can quieten that down without any great deal of problem. But if you get what we would call the police and order group out, we have no idea where they're going, don't know the people involved in it, don't know what's caused it, you turn sometimes when it's just been a minor problem and a serious problem. Now, I personally can say that I have a great relationship with the local policing, and I always push forward the idea of community policing and working together. I'm happy to say without Dermot and the PCSP people in the city that we wouldn't be as far on as we are. But I have to say that I have not met one of our local community police team in nearly 9 months. Up until that, I was getting a regular call maybe when they were passing every 2 or 3 weeks. Now, we know there's cutbacks, but we have a group of elderly people in our area, widowed people, who have said to me, where have the police gone? So I know we might be able to afford the yellow local poppy. We have to ensure that people in the local area have confidence in the police, which they currently has been eroded all the time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. The gentleman at the back, please.
Chief Constable, members of the panel, can I just say a warm welcome to you here to Londonderry tonight. It's good to see you here, and I have to say the previous speaker stole my first question on the issue about rural policing, and I have to say I have represented that rural area for almost 10 years now, and I do agree with the previous speaker. There is a lack of community policing within the rural area, and when I talk to people who live in the rural area who have issues, they always say that they get the short straw. The second question is for you, Chief Constable, is we always listen to how much hell is costing, and you're clearly down to another figure tonight, 25,000 or whatever it is, but I never hear the cost of the fight against dissident Republicans and their attacks on everyone, and I totally condemn the attack that was in Trafficking last night. And I have to say, I'm disappointed that it took over 2 days to get the issue resolved, and I know there are issues around that there and all of that. But when there are delays, whether it be in the Trafficking or in the Waterside, Chief Constable, it does have the same application. And I would ask you tonight, because of the severe threat and your fight against dissidents, which I totally agree with, I have no problem with, but does that contribute to the delay that happened in the Trafficking?
Okay, thank you. Conscious of time, so George, I'm going to ask you to be brief and address the issue of rural crime and the fight against dissident Republicans, and how much does that cost and the drain on the budget?
Well,
if you can be brief.
I come back to how we need to reconfigure our organisation that deals with both the serious and the challenging and the highly complex investigations that are very often invisible, like Mr. McCauley's tragic story with his son. How we allocate resources to that, how we allocate resources to the likes of the operation against violent dissident Republicans in Fermanagh 3-4 weekends ago, where we invested over £1 million in that police operation to recover a £500 bomb, several timing units, pipe bombs, guns, ammunition, and arrested a person who, subject to judicial process, was involved in activity that would have brought harm and devastation to somebody somewhere in this jurisdiction. All of that is largely an invisible spend because of the nature of it. And what needs to happen is there needs to be this mature accountability, and we feel it on a regular basis at the resourcing committee of the board and other board committees that bring the challenge to us around how we spend the money. And we need to know where we spend the money, we need to understand where our costs are, and we probably need to communicate that and explain it better to the communities. But actually, when we're spending money on tackling dissident Republicans and violent dissident Republicans, because I don't mind people dissenting from mainstream Republicanism as long as they don't try to kill people to make their point and use violence to make their point. But when we're spending money on that, we're not spending money on rural crime, for example, on antisocial behaviour and all the rest of them. Bringing us back to the Craigan, which is an understandable hot topic in this room tonight, and the length of time that it cost. You need to believe me that as a human being who had attempted murder 4 police officers in that truck, there was no lack of will on the part of the police service of Northern Ireland to deal with that effectively and to try to bring people to justice. It seems to me like there were communication breakdowns. It seems to me like we have left a bad feeling in the community. We've been 12 steps back, I've heard what you said, sir. We're listening to that. And we will talk to you locally about how we can do better next time around how we explain our actions or our inactions. We need to do that better. But actually, all of this is about balancing quite a limited resource. And that is not easy. And actually, I think that's why the accountability piece, through meetings like this, through the formal policing board meeting that will happen tomorrow, is a really healthy thing for policing, and it should promote confidence in policing, because with those mechanisms comes explanations, comes a change in the way things are done. There are things that have been said in this room tonight that will mean that when the next horrible incident happens like that one with Craigan, we will respond in a different, more informed, more intelligent way. It might be that we still need to have a short period of 18 hours. It might still be that we need another 20 hours to examine the scene. But how we communicate and who we talk to and what we do, how we do it, will need to be shaped by this experience, because we have left people who are pro-policing, who are supportive of policing, with a bad feel about how that was handled in a couple of days. We need to listen and respond to that. And my last point on the physical policing, I don't want to be disparaging or dismissive of neighbourhood policing colleagues who do a great job in terms of reassurance. So in my flippant comment earlier about people in high visibility jackets and don't do very much night shift, that was perhaps flippant. I didn't mean that. What I'm saying is that, I come back to my point, the Patton report talks about response policing once, and it is absolutely peppered with policing with the community and with neighbourhood policing teams. We need to change the whole service delivery model so that people get the localised police officer in the local area dealing with local issues. They're known in the local area and they know the local area as well. And I think we're all trying to get to the same place. We've got a good blueprint in Patton. I don't think it's past its sell-by date. I think we need to finish the job on it.
Okay, thank you, Chief Constable. Folks, we started at 7:10. So we're only running a few minutes over, and before I ask Anne Conley, the chairperson of the board, to draw the meeting to a close with a few remarks, can I just thank our panel, Chief Constable George Hamilton, Anne Conley, chair of the board, and Una, I don't want to get your last name wrong again, Una McCartney, vice chair of the PCSP. Can you give them a round of applause? Thank you for your participation, and over to Anne, who's going to close the meeting.
Okay, well, I just thank all of you for your contributions this evening. I think, as the Chief Constable said, we have learned things. Certainly we've listened, and it has been good to be here. And I know the debate will continue tomorrow. I should have said at the beginning, we started the debate at 1 o'clock today, and we've met 2 different groups. So it really is 2 days of Derry, Londonderry, finding out different views. But it's a genuine attempt to engage, and it's been good to get the opportunity to hear what people are saying. Before we leave, there is just one thing, because I want to come back to policing with the community and the very strong view that we hold around the policing and community safety partnerships, because I really do think that as we move forward in very strict times, that it will be good to have these PCSPs to work with. And we are going to run for short ad, very, very short, just to let you know, today we launch the appeal for new members of people to apply and come forward. So if we just look at that briefly, please.
Most people have a view about how their area is policed, what should be done to make their area safe, or what is needed to tackle a problem that is causing concern. One way to voice this view and put in place measures and actions to respond to local issues is through policing and community safety partnerships, or PCSPs. PCSPs are partnerships made up of local councillors and independent people from the community. They work in the community with the police and a range of statutory, community and voluntary bodies to tackle crime, monitor how the police are performing, and encourage the community to engage and work with the police and other agencies on community safety issues. The Policing Board is looking for people to fill positions on the 11 PCSPs, which will be set up in line with the new councils in April 2015. For more information on what it all involves, visit the board's website at nipolicingboard.org.uk and the PCSP website www.pcsp_s.org, or you can contact the board at 02890 408 553. You can also follow us on Facebook /PCSP and on Twitter at PCSP_S.
I promised you it would be brief. So I hope that those of you in the audience who are interested in joining the PCSP will think carefully about it and apply, because we do need people to come forward and do that. In the meantime, I just say thank you. Those of you who wish to join us tomorrow for the board's public meeting will be in the Waterside Theatre from 11 o'clock until 12:15, and we're all welcome to join us. It's not as interactive. It'll be interactive between the board and the Chief Constable and his team, but not the members of the public, but you're certainly welcome to come and observe. So I want to say thank you very much and safe home. Thank you.